Growing up in the early to late 2000s, I was no stranger to the Sonic the Hedgehog series. At the time, Sonic was a cultural icon that was hard to get away from. Some of my earliest video game memories are attributed to the blue blur. Whether it was playing Sonic Advance 3 on my Game Boy, playing Sonic 2 with my dad on this plug-and-play console I got one year for my birthday, or when I was 8, playing Sonic Generations with my brother and cousins, trying to see who could beat Green Hill Act 2 the fastest. Heck, I even remember playing the Sonic X Leapster game. Needless to say, Sonic had a profound impact on my childhood. I've been a fan of the series essentially since I was sentient enough to understand what a Sonic was. Sega and Sonic hold a special place in my heart, but in recent years, it's no secret that the Sonic the Hedgehog series has been in a bit of a dark age. Since the release of Sonic Boom in 2014, I sort of fell off of the Sonic train for the most part. It spit right in my face and left a sour taste in my mouth for the series. I would only really go back to revisit Sonic to play Sonic Mania in 2017, and then the odd replay of the classics. With Sonic Frontiers, a game that claims to once again reboot the series, reinvigorating my love for Sonic, being released in just a few mere days, I wanted to take a look at where the blue blur got his start by analyzing the very first of his many adventures.
Sonic the Hedgehog! No fool. Come on, just show me what you got. Going fast is cool, going slow is not. Sonic the Hedgehog!
A lot of people consider the Sega Genesis era of Sonic games to be a golden era for the series, and it's hard to disagree with them. The reputation of Sonic was yet to be tarnished, and our prickly hero ultimately had an incredibly positive impact on the gaming landscape. The 4 Sega Genesis classic Sonic games are regarded as some of the best that the series has to offer. My experience with Sonic 1 for a very long time was limited to the mobile port, before it was updated to the Christian Whitehead version we know of today. I remember getting stuck early on and giving up frustrated before even getting past Green Hill Zone, and I feel that's a common experience that many people share playing the original Sonic in a modern gaming landscape. But since then, I've gotten older, and I've revisited the game many times. I had the time to grow and love the game. I've built an appreciation for its challenge and intricate design. I know that I and many others treasure the original Sonic for what it is. But for new Sonic fans who haven't played the classics, or fans thinking about giving the first game a whirl, I want to try and take away that pain I had playing the game my first time. I want to discern whether it's really worth going back to play after all, and if you do, how should you play it? The way I'm going to try and answer my question is by reviewing the quality of a few different aspects of the title. The categories I've decided to take a deep dive into are stage design, music, special stages, and boss fights. I figured these 4 criteria are pretty much the most important things when deciding on whether Sonic 1 specifically is worth playing. It's time to ask, does classic Sonic still hold up? I want to start with a very brief history lesson regarding the blue blur. In the early 90s, Sega was interested in creating a mascot for their company that could rival Nintendo's Super Mario. Previous efforts with Alex Kidd were deemed unsuccessful, so Sega decided to start on a blank slate. Sega ran a contest within their company, where anybody could submit a design for a mascot, resulting in over 200 entries. The winning idea was this little character named Mr. Needlemouse, who would eventually evolve to be the Sonic we know today. Now that that's out of the way, being the very first game in a series with as high aspirations as Sonic did, Sega needed to make absolutely sure they were successful in their efforts, which is apparent from the second you open the game. The classic Sega intro into this colorful selection screen, and this music that screams that this is a game unlike what someone in the 90s had ever seen before. But aesthetics aren't everything. The developers needed to create a first level that would grip the player, keep them hooked, and leave them wanting to play more. Much like making a YouTube video in watch time. Did you know you're not subscribed to my channel? Please do it. Anyhow, that's exactly what Sega achieved with Green Hill Zone. Before the stage even starts, you're immediately hit with this upbeat, catchy tune that immerses you in this colorful world. I don't want to dwell too much on music at this point though, I'm going to have an entire section dedicated to that later in the video. Green Hill Zone is designed with the player in mind. Its 3 acts are designed entirely to show you exactly what Sonic is about. Within the first few seconds of Act 1, you're introduced to many of the game's core elements. Right off the very start, you're introduced to rings. Grab those and continue right. Chances are you're gonna blast right by this ring box and then get hit by a moto bug. This teaches you the health mechanic in the game. You got hit, dropped your rings, and now you have to collect them back. But being hit and slowed down here works to get you to go back and collect the ring box, which ends up giving you 10 rings. And if you're especially observant, you might notice the spring that launches you into the air on top of this tree. As soon as the stage starts, it teaches you the core Sonic mechanics, and it doesn't stop here. Right in the middle of the level, there's this iconic loop that leads you through to a tunnel that launches you into this set of rings. For most players, this is your first introduction to speed. The way each stage in Green Hill is built puts an emphasis on speed while punishing you for getting ahead of yourself. You see, there are these set pieces where Sonic is sent through tubes and spit out on the other side at extremely high speeds, but if you don't know what's coming next, you're without a doubt gonna get hit by awkward enemy placements. This creates a want to repeat the game, to perfect your run through of each level. There is nothing more satisfying than making it through a Sonic stage without getting hit or majorly slowed down. When you do decide to slow down and explore, there are a lot of secrets to uncover. If you want to take it slow in Act 1 and take the more challenging upper path, you're met with some extra ring boxes and shields. The secret area off to the side of Act 2 is super obscure. Once you find it, you're rewarded with rings, a shield, and a fast shoe that lets you breeze through the level at incredible speeds. The player is rewarded when they slow down, helping them create a preferred route through the levels on future playthroughs. Even when fighting the first boss of the game, which I guess is called the Egg Wrecker, I don't really know, that's just what Google says, you're faced with a fight that is simple yet challenging. It's easy to figure out what you need to do, and doing that can be a challenge if you've never fought this boss before. All 3 of the acts in Green Hill are built off of momentum. They're carefully constructed in order to get the player to understand what is theoretically in store for this game. I say theoretically because the next zone in the game, Marble Zone, is a direct contrast to Green Hill gameplay-wise. After giving you a taste of the speeds that Sonic can hit in the previous zone, Marble Zone intends to strip that away from you and directly punishes you for going too fast. The game requires you to consider how to properly use your speed and be more thoughtful about when to go fast. There are these areas where you need to wait for pistons to move out of the way, areas where you need to ride on moving platforms for a significant amount of time, and areas where you need to wait for falling spikes to get out of the way. This new style of gameplay is very challenging on a first playthrough. We were used to taking control of Sonic and using his momentum to blast through the first 3 acts, and now we're forced to take it slow. It's a pretty jarring change, which I'm personally okay with because the music goes hard. So, we're required to slow down, and understandably on a first playthrough this is definitely incredibly frustrating. But, if you are observant and really take your time, there are secrets to be found within the level's walls. This one in Act 1, this one in Act 2, and the final one in Act 3, which allows you to skip half the stage. The third zone, Spring Yard Zone, brings you right back up to speed with more fast-paced level structures that also incorporate some challenging platforming. There are a lot of set pieces that utilize either springs or huge half-pipes to launch Sonic at high speeds. One of my favorite examples of this is right at the start of Act 1. You can use this spring to build up speed and bring yourself over to a floating platform on the left. You can then go to the next area of the level and launch yourself over the top of the stage, skipping a more tedious area of the game. Spring Yard Zone is sort of the precursor to other casino-themed levels in future Sonic games. It's a little rough around the edges though, which can be challenging. The level design at some parts are a little off and can cause some unneeded break in your flow. The only big issue I generally have with Spring Yard Zone is the elevator sections. You can end up getting stuck in these for a little bit. This feels like an unnecessary stop to your momentum that's unneeded. Plus, Spring Yard Zone is goated because you can get stuck like this. Next up in the game is Labyrinth Zone, which is undoubtedly my least favorite area of the game. While Marble Zone had you slow down as a lesson, helping you understand the strength and weaknesses of speed in the game, Labyrinth Zone ultimately slows you down, to slow you down. Labyrinth Zone feels unnecessary, and it's really just unfun. Adding a water level in Sonic was probably not a great choice. Sonic gets nerfed to a molasses pace the entire time. You also put on a timer the entire level, you need to keep getting bubbles to keep yourself from drowning, which can be a lot for a player to deal with on their first time through the game. Dealing with obstacles, rising platforms, and also keeping a gauge of your air leaves a lot for the player to keep an eye on. There's also this really weird skip in Act 1 of the zone. If you go into the first section with the rising platforms, hit this switch, and then rise back up and out of the water, there's just now some random platform that appeared out of nowhere. It skips most of the level, which I like, but it's weirdly complicated to get to. I just don't understand how anyone would feasibly find this on their own. Ultimately, Labyrinth Zone is out of place in a game like Sonic. It unnecessarily ruins the pace of the game. It is incredibly over-challenging. The fifth zone in the game is Starlight Zone, which actually might be one of my personal favorites in the game. I feel it does a lot of what Green Hill does right in a more challenging way. The level design is more split up, making multiple different paths in the level, but if you take the top path of the stage you're on, it'll be over with quickly. I completed Act 1 in under a minute, and for reference, the last time I played this game before making this video was over a year ago. And that's one thing I want to mention about this game. The stage design is memorable. I know these levels like the back of my hand. Sure, I've completed this game countless times, but there are levels that you might not have played for a long stretch of time, but you're gonna remember the secrets and shortcuts throughout the level. I think my favorite shortcut in the game is right here in Act 3. At the start of the level, there's a set piece that shoots you up a ramp like one you might see in Spring Yard Zone, and sends you flying into the sky. If you're prepared, you can land on a platform that's a bit further in the level. This shortcut doesn't save a huge chunk of time, but it's really satisfying to pull off. Starlight Zone also has my favorite boss of the game. It uses a level mechanic that we learned in the levels prior and incorporates it into the boss fight. It's really unique to the rest of the game and I like it a lot. The final zone of the game is Scrap Brain Zone. This zone does a lot of what Marble Zone does, which I think Marble Zone does successfully, but sort of does it worse. Sure, I understand Scrap Brain Zone is supposed to be the final stage, and it's supposed to be the most challenging, but I feel like the zone is filled with too many obstacles and unnecessary areas. There are countless pipes shooting fire, these electrical things, fading platforms, moving blocks that crush you, saws, and these dudes that like shoot bombs or something. I don't really know what that is. The obstacles themselves are fine, and I think they all have their place within the theme of this level and work well, but sometimes there are areas that have two or more of them at once, and it can be really overwhelming. I myself like the challenge, but to a new player, once again, it can be disheartening to get this far in the game and then game over to something that feels as unfair as this area. Act 1 and 2 of the stage are much of the same, which is just fine. Nothing special as a final area of the game, but when we are introduced to Scrap Brain Zone Act 3 is where I really have an issue with this zone. We're thrown into another level of Labyrinth Zone? Why? For what reason are we here again? Why did the developers choose Labyrinth Zone again? But luckily you can skip the entire level if you get underneath this moving platform at the beginning of the zone. Here's a picture of the entire act. Highlighted is how much you actually go through if you take the shortcut versus if you don't. It's kind of insane. It's almost like the developers knew that this area sucked, so they just like gave you a free way out. But once you make it to the end of the stage, you spring yourself out to the final zone. But before we talk about final zone and the final boss, I want to take a few minutes to talk first about the music and then the other boss fights in the game. Don't worry, this is not going to take another 13 minutes. The music in Sonic games is historically really good. The series is known for always having a great soundtrack, and it starts from the first game. It was composed by Masato Nakamura, the bassist of the band Dreams Come True. Interestingly, they put him on this project and he did a really great job. He knew that there was something special about this game and he put all he could into the music. First off, we have Green Hill Zone. We all know the song, and there are countless videos on the internet that have analyzed the song down to its most minute detail. It's iconic, we love it, it fits, it's amazing. It really sets the stage for the game with its iconic melody. It screams adventure. Along with the stage it's made for, the song sets the vibe for the entire Sonic series. Now, Marble Zone has one of my favorite songs in the game. Its upbeat tone gets you really excited to explore the caves of the level. The quick tempo and the kick drum playing throughout the song really carries the flow. It's an amazing track that fits the stage very well. Spring Yard Zone is another amazing song. Its industrial sounding synths fit the level perfectly and once again set the tone for the level. I I really like this one. It's super catchy and I find myself excited to get to Spring Yard Zone in order to hear the song. Now, Labyrinth Zone. While I dislike the level, the music is amazing, and I feel like it's a shame that the song is put into a level that's not as good. I love this song. Next. Starlight Zone has another amazing song. Are you starting to notice a theme here? Every single song in this game is good. It really sounds like the name of the stage. It sounds like Starlight. It's amazing. Another great song. The last song here is Scrap Brain Zone. It sounds like a Final Zone song, and it's pretty good. It's sort of mysterious and sounds industrial. I like it a lot, although I feel like these little knocks in the background don't fit. But what do I know? I know nothing about music production and composition. Interestingly though, Act 3 also has this music, even though it's a Labyrinth Zone clone. That's really it for me. Music gets a big ol' A+. Now onto the boss fights. I find the boss fights to be underwhelming in this game. We talked a little bit about Green Hill Zone's boss fight, which I think is one of the only really good fights in the game. It's simple to figure out, but challenging in its own way. You gotta avoid that swinging ball, and it can be tough. Once you figure it out, it poses absolutely no challenge at all. The issue with the boss fights in Sonic 1 is that they feel very uninspired. They feel like they were thrown together because each world needed a boss for you to fight. Compared to the bosses in later Sonic entries, these aren't too great. Marble Zone's boss fight is really easy. All you do is jump in between these two platforms while Robotnik sets one side of the stage on fire. It's really easy to avoid, and you get multiple chances to hit him in one go, and that ends the fight in a really short amount of time. This is a really quick fight, and it's not really hard. Spring Yard Zone's boss fight is actually a little unique, but ultimately it's even easier than all the others. All Robotnik does is lunge down and takes a piece of the ground, but while he does, you can get in 2 to 3 hits each time, and since you only gotta hit him 8 times, it's the easiest in the game. Labyrinth Zone doesn't even really have a boss fight. You chase Robotnik through this obstacle course, which is actually really hard, by the way. It's really frustrating with its obstacle placement. This is where I would stop playing a lot of the time when I was younger, but really there's nothing here. There's no fight. Just make it to the top and you win. But if you are really skilled at the game, you can actually hit Robotnik enough times to get him to break down. But that's super hard, and I've actually never managed to do it myself. I briefly mentioned Starlight Zone's boss early in the video. It's probably my favorite one in the game, which isn't saying too much, but this fight is kinda cool. You can launch these spikes to either hit Robotnik that way, or you can have yourself launched up to hit him. And we do this by using the seesaws we use for platforming throughout the rest of the Starlight Zone. It's actually really fun and can be satisfying to hit him with the spikes when you time it correctly. And this brings us to the final boss in the game. Whatever this is. The final boss of Sonic 1 is really underwhelming. It's extremely easy and poses very little challenge. All you have to do is dodge the crushers and then dodge the electricity circles, and both are very easy to do. I embarrassingly died once to this boss when I wasn't paying attention whatsoever. I feel like the most challenge from this boss is whether you get lucky or not, like if Robotnik is in an area where you're capable of hitting him. Once beating the final boss, you can give Robotnik one final send-off by hitting him in extra time, and roll credits. In the end, the bosses in the first Sonic game aren't great, and also very similar. There's nothing really making them challenging. They can be fun to complete super fast, but that's really it. What's this? Try again? Yeah, there are 2 endings to this game. A good ending and a bad ending. If throughout the adventure you collected the 6 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic uses them to add more vegetation to the cutscene after Final Zone. Also, instead of juggling the Chaos Emeralds at the end, Robotnik is jumping frustrated at this end thing. And yes, I said 6 Chaos Emeralds. It's not until Sonic 2 that there are 7, and that you can transform into Super Sonic. So in this game, there's a lot less incentive to collect them all. So now it's time to talk about the special stages. In any of the first 2 acts of each zone, if you reach the end post with 50 rings or more, this big ring will appear that you're able to jump through. Once you do that, you get transported to a special stage, which is this fever dream-like space that, like, what even is this? The special stages in Sonic 1 are pretty frustrating. This ever-rotating stage is really hard to control yourself around, and it's really confusing at times. The goal of the special zones are to get through this maze-like area, and then collect the Chaos Emerald at the end. There are a few different stage elements that affect how the board rotates. An R circle that rotates the stage in the opposite direction from where it was already going. It'll switch it from clockwise to counterclockwise and vice versa. There's another circle that says down, which slows the rotation speed of the game, and then another circle that says up, which speeds up the rotation. There are also bumpers that send you around the stage pretty erratically. Be careful though, as you're going through the stages, if you hit a circle that misleadingly says goal, I don't know why it says goal if it's not the goal to hit it, you'll be sent back out of the level and into the next act, failing the special stage. Like I said previously, there's no real incentive to collect the emeralds unless you're the completionist type. It kind of concludes my analyzation of the game. Ultimately, I think that Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is still worth playing to this day, but unless you're someone who likes to complete games to its fullest, I'd skip out on the Chaos Emeralds. You'll still have the same experience whether or not you collect them, since there's no gameplay incentive like we see in future Sonic games. But to answer the question of how you should play this game, there's two different remakes of this game that I would suggest. The first of which is the Sonic Origins collection. I know that a lot of hardcore Sonic fans really despise the collection for some reasons I won't get into, but if you're interested in trying all of the main classic Sonic era games, I think this is the right fit for you. The Origins collection has two different game modes for you to play the core games as. There's Anniversary Mode and Classic Mode. Anniversary Mode is a more updated version of the game. It comes with these cute animations before you start your adventure and then after as well. It also does away with the live system. Instead of lives, you collect coins, and you can spend the coins on retries for special stages or in other parts of the Origins collection. It's also in 16:9, which is why I chose Anniversary Mode for most of the footage you see in this video. I do think that Anniversary Mode is too easy though. There's no punishment for dying or failing a stage, but if you're just concerned with simply completing the game, I think this is for you. If you're someone who would like a more accurate Genesis experience, you can choose Classic Mode. In this mode, there's a life system as well as no retries on the Chaos Emeralds. I would personally suggest playing this mode, and this is because Sonic 1 was built around you replaying the game. I think that if you play Anniversary Mode, play each stage once, and then pack it up, you won't be left with a satisfying experience. By playing Classic Mode, you're going to be forced to replay the earlier stages a few times, and with each run-through, you'll have more of a blast breezing through the stages. I typically like to replay this mode. When I was doing research on this video, I played it this way. I think it's just a better Sonic experience. The Origins collection also adds the Spin Dash and Drop Dash, neither of which were in the original Sonic 1 on the Genesis. And hey, you can also play as Tails or Knuckles in the game, so that's pretty cool. If the Origins collection is too pricey for you, which is understandable, it's $40. That's $10 for each game in the pack, and the games are around 30 years old. You can choose to play the mobile port, which is free right now. You do have to deal with some ads, but this is a complete Sonic 1 remaster by Christian Whitehead. This is what really got me into the games. The mobile port includes a save feature as well as a 7th Chaos Emerald, which now lets you turn into Super Sonic, so that's a huge plus. For most players, I think the mobile port is pretty good. It's a best of both worlds between the two modes in the Origins collection. It's still life-based and has some of the better features that Origin collection has, with the added Supersonic perk. And it's free. Nothing is better than free. That pretty much finishes all I have to say about the original Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a game that overall is pretty good in my opinion. It's definitely rough around the edges, but I think we need to take into account that this was the first game in the Sonic series, so it was destined to be a little all over the place. At times the game is frustrating and over-challenging, but that's what the game was meant to be, a game that would force you to replay it over and over again. What Sega did with the first Sonic set the character up to reach further heights and solidify his place in video game history. This game is an outline for what Sonic is to become, and I think that's important. So if you have the money to spend on the Origins collection, or if you have a phone that's able to play the game, I would 100% suggest that you do it. It's a great part of video game history that I think most people should experience. But ultimately, it's all up to the player whether they enjoy the game or not. If you take the time to play it the way it was intended, I'm sure you'll be left with a memorable experience. This was PajamaJohn, and thanks for watching.